we're getting near the end of our principles of discovery, and then we'll move on to something else. I've been thinking of probably going over the book, The Unveiling, discussing the meaning of the book of Revelation. That would be pretty interesting. But any comments or suggestions are always welcome. The next principle in the principles of discovery is principle 16. Put your attention on finding that which is true rather than that which is an error. Now remember, these principles are all built around helping the disciple sort out truth from error. And this is something that's difficult for a lot of people to do. Matter of fact, you go on any of these spiritual groups on Facebook, and one question that keeps surfacing is people wonder, well, how come people claim to be in contact with God or the higher self or master, yet they don't agree with each other? Okay. And so this is a problem that people have, is finding out, sorting the truth from error, because you find even a lot of teachers that are pretty good teachers, seem pretty enlightened, they will not agree with each other. But one thing that doesn't disagree is your higher self. Your higher self doesn't disagree with somebody else's higher self. Like Jill's higher self will agree with my higher self. Even if we would disagree with something on a personality level, our higher selves would not disagree, because they see through a higher angle of vision. Now, there may be a limit to their vision. There's a limit to almost everything that's not completely blended with the original source. So, but from our viewpoint, from our perspective, one higher self will agree in principle with another higher self. So let's say that Jill and I disagreed with something on personality level. If it's something trivial like colors, say I like blue and she likes green, well, the higher selves would say that that's of no consequence. So they don't care about stuff like that, you know. But if it's something important, like some principle or what we're going to do in a spiritual work together or something like that, then if we contact, and we had a disagreement about it, if we contact our higher selves, one higher self will agree with the other. And if she made a true contact and I made a true contact, and then we come and talk about it, we could reach agreement. And even if we disagreed previously on a personality level, because our the higher part of ourself that's linked to God sees with a much higher angle of vision than we do. I always like to compare it to the dream state. Think of how much higher your angle of vision is when you're awake than when you're dreaming. When you're in a dream, your vision is very constructed. You know, you don't even know you're dreaming. You don't even know that the world you see is not real on the next level up. Now, when you wake up, then you see with a much higher angle of vision. And after death, we eventually will merge with our souls, and we will see from a higher angle of vision, because we will realize us and our souls, our higher self, are one. So anyway, it's important that we do everything that we can to discover what is truth. And this principle is a good one. Principle 16, put your attention on finding that which is true rather than that which is in error. You ever come across people that just seem like they're highly critical and they find all kinds of things that's wrong? Or let's say you write something and you give it to somebody and they criticize in every sentence, and what they're saying, maybe there's something to it, but just they didn't need to be that critical, okay? Or if you ask their opinion about some work you've done, they are quite critical about it. Now, are these people that are highly critical like this, have you ever had such a person reveal something that's really helpful and truthful to you that you didn't realize before? And think of people that have helped you and lifted you up higher than you are. Were they super critical of you? Did they lift you up because they were able to criticize you correctly? Or did they lift you up because of a spirit of helpfulness? Well, let's pick on somebody here. Lucy, are you still here? Oh, she must have left. Who shall we pick on? Well, we haven't picked on Nick lately. Nick, are you there?
Yeah, just a sec.
Have you encountered people like that in your life that's super critical?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sorry.
Did all that criticism do any good?
Honestly, I think if you have the correct attitude, sometimes it can. Just, being open to what's valuable in it. But I do think that generally speaking, having a more positive outlook, more cheerful outlook helps people more.
Yeah, when somebody really is really critical, doesn't it make you feel like naturally resisting?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it produces a kind of a natural resistance. So if you're resisting, even if the criticism is true, you're likely to not accept it. And because you don't want to accept it, you don't want them to be right if they're kind of super critical. And have you encountered this on Facebook groups or the internet? Have you had any encounters with people that are super critical?
Oh yeah, I mean it's like most of what you see on the internet.
Yeah, it seems like people feel they're free to be as critical as they want because you can't punch them out because they're 1,000 miles away. But yeah, it's kind of funny. So anyway, it's a good thing to be skeptical of groupthink and to look for alternatives. But it's not a good idea for the seeker to have a center of focus on error. So what's the difference between just being gullible and being a true seeker? We shouldn't be gullible either, because it's good to be skeptical. It's good to see criticism for what it is. But on the other hand, you don't want to accept everything that's out there. Do you guys know people that just seem to go along with everything and not have much discernment about what they're receiving? For instance, there's a lot of channeled books and stuff out there and people interested in them. And I've encountered people that have encountered channeled things that says there's no reincarnation. and then something else that says there is reincarnation, and they accept them both. So I think, well, how can they accept them both? Either there is reincarnation or there isn't. They both can't be true. But a lot of people, it's good to be believing, but not so much that you don't have any filters up. You got to have a certain amount of filtering in your system there. And then there's negative people, and then there's true seekers and true teachers. But there's certain negative people that are just really difficult to deal with. They may have a high knowledge of, say, what you're studying. Like there's a lot of Facebook groups out there with studying different books or different authors. And on each one you go to, you'll find there's 2 or 3 that think they're the expert. And but on the other hand, some of these people that are self-proclaimed experts are also very negative. If you disagree with them, they will attack you and set you straight. So the true seeker has this balance that he has to get between negativity and positivity, and to be able to discern where he puts his attention. Now, the seeker becomes aware of both truth and error when his focus is on seeking the truth. If his focus is on finding what's wrong with everything, then he will find stuff that's wrong, but he will not find much that is true, because you find what you're looking for. But when you find that which is true, then truth also reveals error. So when you find that which is true, you find both truth and error. When you're looking for error only, for what's wrong, that's generally all you will find. People with their focus on what's wrong, often the truth just goes over their head because they're not looking for the truth. They're looking for something to criticize. So energy follows thought, which is one of the keys. It plays a big hand here, because if you're looking for error, then the energy in your thought is directed toward what is wrong rather than what is right. If you're looking for truth, then the energy of your thought is focused on what is true, and that'll be what will manifest. Any comment on that before we move on?
May I give an example, JJ, about something I remember from a while back, that you wrote articles that you you put some Hebrew words there.
Yeah.
And I read your articles and I sent you corrections about the Hebrew.
Yeah.
But still the whole the message of the whole stayed intact with your errors. It was still the message itself. The whole message was true, even. but you did need to correct the Hebrew. But it was very interesting to see.
Yeah, it's interesting that Asaf is a lot more of an expert on Hebrew than I am, especially the grammar part. And so if I make a mistake, he sends me a correction, but he doesn't do it from the attitude of looking for error. You know, it's just he's looking for truth, and he sees some error in maybe my use of certain words, and he sends me correction, and he does it with helpfulness. So it's no problem. There's no resistance that way. So there's a way, there's no problem with correcting people by being sincerely helpful. And it's interesting that you say if I'm speaking, if I'm writing intuitively and make a mistake, and also says he sometimes throws in a correction, but even with a correction, even with my mistake, the meaning was still basically correct. The correction of the mistake just made it a little clearer. Is that what you're saying there also?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I'm glad I was still on the right track. That's good. Now, another problem we have is people that take things too literally, and people that take things really literally are often looking for error, because if you go off their literal interpretation, then they come at you and feel a need to set you straight. An example would be people that take the scriptures as the literal word of God. Like some even think the King James version is pretty much the one that God approves of. And if you disagree with one word in there in black and white, then they will get upset and become very critical. The funny thing about the Bible, though, is people focus in black and white. And so one of the big divisions of Bible believers is some believe you're saved by faith only, and others say, no, you have to have works as well as faith. So, but the funny thing about the Bible is that it will support either one. If you could take the scriptures out of context and prove your point on either side of this equation. So if you're a person that believes in faith only, that works are not necessary, and they come across someone that says, yeah, we need to do these good works, then they will attack them because they have a black and white view of it. But what the truth seeker does when he comes across someone that say disagrees with him or is teaching something that he considers wrong, how does the true person that has the higher contact, how do you deal with someone that you know is saying something wrong? It's not something that will destroy anybody, like having them drink poison Kool-Aid or something like that. I mean, just the person, you think he is wrong on a certain belief. How do you handle that? Do you just let it go, or do you seek to correct them? If you do feel the need to correct them, how do you go about it? Let's pick on somebody here. Well, let's pick on Ed. How do you go about correcting somebody? If you see somebody saying something wrong, what do you do, Ed?
Well, I would ask them a question that would be leading toward an answer that I thought was more appropriate. But when you try to correct someone, they take it as an attack, and it sets up resistance.
Yeah. That's a good way to go, is just ask a simple question. Sometimes even that gets you in trouble with them, because people don't want to be criticized, especially a lot of teachers. People who see themselves as teachers or experts on something, they do not want to be criticized. So you have to proceed kind of gently. Yeah, Ed, you were going to say something?
You have to understand who it is that you're speaking to, and the best way to speak to them. Some people, you you craft your speech in a way that can get through the fog.
Dale Carnegie suggests you do this to make a correction. He says, before you make the correction, if you feel that it's something you need to do, he says, say something you agree with first. Okay, so you find somebody that says something you think is just not logical. You say, well, you said this and this was really good and I really agree with this, but maybe this would shed some more light, and then you give him your ideas that maybe conflict with his, but because you started out agreeing with him, then he doesn't have his defenses up so much. So that's one good way to approach people that you disagree with. Another is just let them know you're being helpful. You could say, well, you know, I read this in this book and this author says this, what do you think? And so you're not saying, hey, you're wrong and I'm right. You're presenting him with additional things. Now, there's a handful of people I know I've dealt with that there's just no way to disagree with them or to have a conversation at all. So they do not want to reach oneness with anybody. There's a handful of people like that. But then there's others that I've had conversations with that you get a feel of people that you think, well, I can express a different opinion to this guy and he'll understand. And then he gives his opinion back and you go back and forth and you have a nice, friendly conversation. You may reach agreement and you may not, but you're still friends. There are a lot of people like that. And so that's what you got to do. You kind of got to size the people up you're dealing with, get a feel of their mindset and how far you can go with them. Because if we just come out and criticize somebody, say you're right and I'm wrong, if you give them that, if you make them think, present that attitude toward them, they will see you as an enemy sometimes and do everything they can to put you down later on. And okay, any other comments on that? Any comments on dealing with difficult people in your lives?
Yes, I have something to say about that. I have a very good friend that has been my real challenge throughout the years, because she is so, as you explained, that she's just in a mindset that she wants to find something wrong, no matter what you say, how you put it, how you explain it. She's very ready to, you know, to go full attack. And
She's what I call people like that are gatekeepers.
what?
What I call people like that are gatekeepers. You know,
Yes.
keepers of the gate to whatever.
Yeah, but we had very many interesting discussions because we are so far apart, and I actually have broken with her the friendship several times because it's like this, you know. But then we start to talk together again, and I just realized when you start, when you walk the spiritual path, you start speaking some other language, which is sometimes very hard to put in the normal conversation world with people that are not into this at all, you know.
Yeah, you gotta speak the person's own language. And
Yeah, but the thing is that you just have to respect one another, and when she is far away from where I am and vice versa, I always say, okay, I don't, you know me, you know I see these things differently, and that I feel different about this, you know. So it's not very too much on walking on thin ice with her. So, you know, you just have to find the balance in that too. But yeah, it's a challenge, really.
Yeah, I found some difficult people I've encountered on the internet, they wind up wasting a lot of my time because they just want to argue. So sometimes it's best just to start ignoring them completely.
Yeah.
Frees up a lot of extra time sometimes, because these contrary people can wind up taking a lot of your time. Okay, we're all good, Maria. We'll go on to the next principle. It's called the pendulum principle.
Yeah.
Principle 17. People swing back and forth in their beliefs to extreme positions. The seeker must resist the swing and look for the truth somewhere in the middle. So you look at society as a whole, it swings either conservative or liberal. And just think of how different your society was wherever you were back in the 1960s and 70s compared to today, especially the 50s and 60s. Now I was a young in the 50s, and it was so much different than today. There was women didn't have all the rights they have now, and they couldn't even get their own bank account without some man giving approval, and different things like this. They're very conservative on TV. When TV first came out, they like in I Love Lucy, they had twin beds. They couldn't sleep together in one bed, even with pajamas on or anything. And they had all these really conservative rules. And but then the 60s came, and people began to break the rules, changed, and we swang in a more liberal direction. And in between now and then, we've swung back and forth between liberalism and conservatism to different degrees. Overall, society is much more liberal than they were in a couple of generations ago. But then we're swinging to kind of stricter rules where we're getting into control of speech and what's correct speech and what isn't. Now, back in the 50s, we had this on TV, the strong censorship, what was correct speech and what wasn't. And now we're getting back to that again, but this time what's correct is kind of determined by the left a lot more, where in the old days it was more determined by the right. But everything goes in cycles. And to discover the truth, you just can't go along with groupthink, because groupthink goes along with where the pendulum is. If the pendulum is swinging to the right, groupthink will be centered more on the right, and it will take both the left and the right with it. Okay, wherever the pendulum swings for society, it takes everybody with it to a certain degree. Just like right now, the censorship they had in the 50s and 60s, just not acceptable to hardly anybody today. But so the swing took everybody with it to a certain degree. But to see what is true, the disciple has to look at that swing and figure out where the swing of the pendulum is on different issues and different facets of life. Say, on spirituality, the pendulum is in a certain location. in politics. This pendulum may be at a little bit different location than the spiritual pendulum. And on maybe science and beliefs of science, the pendulum may be in another location still. But in different trains of thoughts, different professions, there's the pendulum is swinging back and forth, and it's always at a different location. And people don't take this into consideration about the swing. So if we're going to find the truth of things, we need to figure out where the pendulum is, and there's no exact formula that you can put together, like 2 + 2 = 4. You can figure out exactly what the answer is. But in seeing the pendulum swing, you have to study it to figure out where it is and where you're going to take your stand, which is somewhere between the two extremes. And as I pointed out at the gathering, between the swing of the pendulum will be a point of highest truth. And this is what the true disciple will look for in the swing. Say, well, let's take abortion, for instance, very controversial. The pendulum swings back and forth on dealing with abortion. There's a point of truth in the middle that would be the best policy to make in dealing with it, that probably wouldn't be completely acceptable to either extreme, but somewhere in the middle would be the best solution to that problem. And where that point is takes a contemplation, and also seeking to get an impression through your own soul as to where that point of truth is. To whether or not to get vaccinated or not, there's a point of truth in the middle about the truth about the whole vaccination thing. And maybe as it applies to you might be different than it would apply to somebody else. So first of all, you have to look at where the pendulum is and where the highest point of truth is. And then as it applies to you, maybe if you have to get vaccinated to keep your job and feed your family, well, maybe your soul might tell you to go ahead. If you're skeptical and not dependent on the powers that be, then maybe you might make a different decision. So the bottom line is the disciple has to look at both sides and figure out where the truth in the middle is. Okay, any more comments on that? Okay, we just got a few minutes left. The principle 18 is a seeker must not scatter his energies, but maintain focus on finding the truth. When he does this, it's only a matter of time before he finds his answers. This is a problem a lot of people have in life, is they try that shotgun approach, where, as you know, if you ever shot a shotgun that's composed of little BBs that will scatter the smaller and the more shot that's in the shell, the more scattered the firing will be. And so shotgun shells are a lot different than regular shells. Regular shell just has one bullet, where a shotgun has all kinds of tiny little pebbles that scatter all over the place. And so this is why it's called the shotgun approach, because a lot of people scatter their energies because each one of the little pellets in a shotgun are not very deadly. They're not like a concentrated bullet where you just have one particle that is very deadly if it happens to hit its target. So if we have that shotgun approach, scatter our energies, we often wind up not being successful in anything. And it's kind of what I call the Forrest Gump principle goes along with this, is that he wasn't very intelligent, but he was very focused, and it made him successful at whatever he did. And I found this in my work. I have traveled a good portion of the United States, worked in hundreds of towns, visited thousands of businesses in my sales work. And as I was visiting the many different business owners that I've talked to, I become curious as to why some succeeded and why some didn't. Some of them, a lot of them just didn't have any money to buy anything. And a lot of them were flush with money and had plenty of money and were very successful. And one of the things I began to notice was it didn't seem to be very much related to how intelligent they were. Some of the most intelligent people were the least successful, and a lot of the ones that were very successful just didn't seem to be that bright. And that made me kind of curious, and I thought quite a bit about it. And the Forrest Gump principle came to me over this thinking, how that as I studied these people, I found that the ones that were the most successful, one thing they all had in common, they were focused. And they focused on what they were doing. They weren't distracted by a lot of things. And so they, even though they weren't maybe as smart as the next guy, they kept their focus and they succeeded. But some of the very intelligent people that I met in my life are very handicapped because they're very scattered. They get all kinds of ideas. And so they throw these ideas all over the place. And they're never successful because they start to implement one idea and then they'll get a better idea. So they drop that idea and then they go on to the better idea, and then pretty soon they get a better idea still. So they drop the other idea and go on to a new idea, or maybe they try to develop 2 or 3 ideas at one time and they are just never successful. So I call this a Forrest Gump principle because in the movie, you remember that he wasn't very bright at all, but when he made up his mind to do something, he went and got it done and was a lot more successful than some people that are highly intelligent. So it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you don't focus your energies, then your chances of success are not high. Now, this is the same. This can be applied in searching for truth. If you're searching for truth and then you stop, maybe you read a couple pages in one book, then you go to another book that's teaching something else, and then something else, and then you switch all around. Pretty soon, you don't really get enlightened about anything. But the people that are some of the most interesting are those that have focused their energies. And maybe they haven't read every spiritual book out there, but maybe they're really an expert on one teacher or 1 or 2 lines of thought. And these people are quite interesting to talk to. And they've done a lot of thinking about it because they have focused their energies. And same thing if you have a question, you have a question, if you focus on that question and do everything you can to resolve that question, then you're likely to eventually get an answer. And same thing with your own soul. Focus on getting that breakthrough contact with your own soul. And if you do it long enough and with enough intensity, then that will happen. Okay, any more comments on that principle? What do you think, Joshua? Do you think that's a good idea to focus your energies?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah. Now, you work at Lucis Trust. Do you find a lot of people there really focus a lot on the Tibetan and to the exclusion of a lot of other things, or
Yeah.
are some of them scattered, or what kind of people do you encounter there?
Yeah, well, it's obviously mostly focused on the Tibetan.
Yeah. So they, you go to work and start talking to those people. They don't talk about some other, about Seth Speaks and stuff like that, huh?
No, not too much except for approved stuff.
Yeah. So are some, and some of them are probably pretty knowledgeable about DK's works, I imagine, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any comments or questions before we wrap this up?
Well, there are a few simple things that we need to focus on. And like it says in the Bible, you seek these things first and all the rest will be added unto you. I found that if you stick with the simple stuff, the rest falls into place.
Yeah. Yeah, I just point out one more thing. When I was younger, I read the words of Jesus. He says, seek and you shall find. And I thought, well, that sounds good. So I started asking for a bunch of stuff and, you know, nothing much came right on the spot anyway. And so I was wondering about that. And then I finally come across this parable that Jesus gave that shed some light on that. And this, it talks about this woman had some guests and at midnight, and she needed a loaf of bread to feed the guests. And so she went to the next door neighbor and knocked on the door and woke him up, and he was really irritated at being woke up. And she says, I have some unexpected guests. Can you, can I get a loaf of bread from you? And he says, go away. You know, don't you realize it's late and I'm trying to get some sleep? And she just kept banging on the door and wouldn't give up. And she says, I gotta have that loaf of bread. And he says, go. He kept telling her to go away and she wouldn't. And then it winds up saying, not because he really wanted to, or because he liked the woman or anything like that, but because she would not give up, he gave in and he went and gave her that loaf of bread. And then Jesus, after going through this, says, even so, with God, ask and you shall receive. So in other words, you got to make a nuisance of yourself with God or your soul. Make a nuisance, just keep asking, keep pestering away, and sooner or later then the soul will say, well, I guess he's not going to give up, so I guess I'll have to take some time out and answer the guy.
Well, there's a lot of other things that are involved in what you find, you know, their karmic condition from past lives, what you've accomplished. And you know, when I was a teenager, I was dedicated to studying and contemplating, looking for the meaning of life. And when people came to me and offered me what I was seeking, I didn't have to go out and shake the trees to see what nuts fell out.
Yeah, well, good. Okay, my friends, good group today, and we will sign off and see you next Sunday at 10 a.m. all being well.
See you monkeys next week.
Yeah.
Thanks.
On